probably augmented reality in some way, that becomes mainstream. That, bandwidth is cheap, the technologies and processing is cheap. Being able to do some kind of augmented reality where we can digitally, virtually be in the same meeting rooms, that kind of thing will take off. I don't think it'll be huge, but I think it'll go. The low-hanging fruit, I think it's absolutely all of the unified communication platforms.
Hello world, this is BetterTech, a podcast where we chat with some of the most successful leaders about the latest industry developments. So join us as we explore the world reliant on tech. This episode is brought to you by Tkxel, a leading software development company. Check them out at tkxel.com. We have today Wade Burgess, EVP of Sales for Automation Anywhere, and Umair Javed, CEO Tkxel, to talk us through on how businesses can weather unforeseen events, the importance of pragmatic optimism, and to share tips on how to keep employees digitally prepared and actively engaged when working remotely. So welcome once again, Wade and Umair, and let's get right to it.
So I understand that you are from the RPA world, but today's topic is around remote work. But it will be helpful if you can just give us a little bit of introduction of yourself, and we can take our discussion from there.
Yeah, of course. So I spent most of my career in technology sales, and that's from everything in the days of businesses trying to adopt internet usage, believe it or not, T1s and co-location and hosting, all the way through the various technologies that companies have used to try to be more productive and more successful. One pretty long run in there, almost 10 years with LinkedIn, running the talent solutions line of business. So connecting talent with opportunity, and the context of today's conversation, I work with most of the HR leaders around the world, talent acquisition leaders around the world, as they've migrated from on-premise teams to various types of distributed teams using the technologies out there today. And then I've gone, from there, I've worked also with gig workers, and then also with digital workers. And as we work, in today's environment, there's a combination of all of the above, of people who physically work together, people who are digitally connected around the world, and also to our digital counterparts, where automation comes alongside of our, their human counterparts to get business done.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, which part of your work so far have you enjoyed most? Selling, being part of LinkedIn Solution Talent, or what?
Well, that's a great question. I don't think it's any particular company, or I don't think it's any particular technology. What I love the most is seeing someone become capable of something beyond what they thought. So a human realizing their full potential, I think, is the most rewarding thing to me, especially if I can in some way be a part of that journey, empowering them with, it might be a belief, it might be a technology, it might be a technique, or just something where if I can, invest in another person or in an environment where people can become, something great. That's that, I think we all have that moment where we get the biggest buzz from what we do. For me, it's about that.
I simply call it adding value. If you can add value to anyone's life, anyone's business, and if you live your life with that mantra, a lot of good things start happening to you. So I run a company, and we always think that what is our core value, and I always tell my team, our core value should always be customer centricity and adding value to customers' business. So because if we can just believe in that, the money, everything, the business, it will start falling into the place. And when you said that, I kind of really believe in that. When you try to add value to someone, it really pays off. So good to know that we have someone who really believes in adding value to other people's life and other people's stuff. And that, I guess that's what got you here as well, adding more value to some of our audience's mindset. Anyway, so coming to this COVID situation, this is all happening right now, and it's not good. The world is going through it. We are in this together. So how do you see things are changing in terms of technology, working environment in this COVID-19 thing? I understand that working remote work is right now the order of the day, but how you are seeing this transition happening?
Yeah, I think this is a unique moment in time, and we should always take advantage of those moments in time, good or bad. In my lifetime, I think in the lifetime of knowledge work, we've never had a global pandemic where economies essentially shut down. So there isn't a comparable.
I mean, nobody has been preparing for that. It's unprecedented, and for us, for all of us, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I can say, I feel very fortunate that we have, you know, a lot of the trends that were happening were really helping us prepare for this day. And, you know, so the work from home trends, the video technology trends, even things like digital signatures, all the things that have happened, have been kind of gradually happening are just have accelerated a lot. So an example, in today's moment, interviewing and recruiting. So people are still recruiting, people are still hiring, and regardless of what's going on in the short term, there's some companies that can't hire fast enough, and they've had to change everything. And fortunately, there are technologies out there to do, video interviewing and hire people without ever seeing them. Team collaboration, all the various platforms out there. Today we're talking on Zoom, but there's a whole list of them. There's 8x8 and Ring Central, and there's like 100 of them that have really been building for this moment. Communication platforms like Slack and Teams and all of those. So what I see is this is like a massive pressure test on many of these trends that are already happening. These have been going on, and starting to accelerate. This is a pretty dramatic acceleration. And to specifically answer your question, I think there were definitely some holdouts on remote work. There are groups of people who fundamentally believed you simply had to be in the same room, especially for a startup, or especially for an engineering team, or especially for whatever their holdout was.
They advocate that culture building is done in the same team, in the same room, a lot of that kind of stuff. I mean, people advocate that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I would be the first. I'm a big proponent of technology, but I will say there is something unique that happens when one human being physically meets another human being. There's an intangible there that I don't know that we know how to replicate, nor will we know how to replicate. That being said, I think we also are at the essence. This is a really good sort of minimum viable product test. If you think about human interaction, what is the MVP?
So I see that we were actually preparing for minimum viable product, but it's like a full-blown production test to me. I mean, what is happening?
Yeah, exactly. This is when you are not even in your, you're not even releasing, your version 0.1 yet, and suddenly you're in full production, and it's the whole world on your platform. On the other hand, I think there's something else here that's happening that I'm finding really endearing. That is the relationships people have. Suddenly, I don't know that I would say they're deeper, but they're much more broad. So I'm watching team meetings happen across video platforms, and they're meeting someone's dog, or the child comes in and sits on their lap, or they know the little Lego decoration behind them, or those are things you probably could have worked with someone for 5 years and never known anything about. And suddenly you're connected to their real world, their personal life, in a way we haven't before.
Some of these were frowned upon. I mean, you're working and someone your child starts screaming and people are, oh, stop, don't scream, I'm on a call. But now it's pretty normal. I mean, when the prime ministers of the world are taking calls and their kids are playing behind, I mean, it's all of a sudden it's the new norm. I mean,
yeah, I have to say it's refreshing to me, because I've spent most of my career, on an airplane somewhere, or in a hotel, or with my kids around me in some environment doing business, when other people were sitting in a conference room in Silicon Valley, and I was the remote attendee who was, shushing my kids or trying to create an environment where there wasn't distracting things going on behind me. So it's kind of refreshing to watch the rest of the world need to do that, and realizing that you also can blend the two, professional and personal lives, much more than people thought you could, and create that kind of harmony between, the things that you need to do at home and the things that you do at work.
So I kind of second that, and we'll come to that later. I mean, I was telling someone that probably I don't want to go back. My life was so busy, and now it's kind of intertwined with my personal life. I can take a small break and be like for 5 minutes with my kids, and then come back and do my work. So I'm giving them time, giving my work time, and it's kind of refreshing for me as well. Though, I mean, let's talk about. I mean, we all understand that there is an enabling environment that needs to be done and all that. But you feel there are certain challenges. One challenge that I feel is a way too much communication overload for companies who are not prepared. I mean, people who are just used to do meetings in person, do quick stuff on each other's computer. There's now too much communication overload. How do you feel about that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And this accentuates that specifically the normal corporate structure is not built for efficiency, and specifically communication efficiency. A lot of people kind of use the law of tonnage to do the communication. And today, it's even more important that you have so much, we talked about, if we were talking 3 months ago, we'd probably talk about email overload. We probably wouldn't be talking about Slack overload and all, like the bombardment of other things. The reality is, I think the best leaders out there are teaching people how to communicate in this environment in a way that's succinct, and also when to pick up the phone. It's never been more important to know when to pick up the phone for a 2-minute phone call. If there's a time where there's some discussion thread, especially if it's emotional, people have opinions about it. If you're in a Teams or Slack channel, this could go on forever and everyone's weighing in on it, versus picking up the phone to the 3 people that really need to align on something and aligning on it. Or if there's a conflict, if you and I have a conflict, if you pick up the phone and say, hey, Wade, let's just resolve this. Here's my opinion. What is yours? How do we get to, and 5-10 minutes, you can solve that. These things aren't happening enough right now. And I think that hiding behind a keyboard is a pretty poor way to have important conversations.
Right.
So jumping on video or on the phone is important.
So, there's always used to be a debate that email cannot convey emotions. And then there's a body language that is associated when you meet someone physically. Phone to an extent solve that because they can hear your voice, they can see the tonality, and then the video is another step over, and physical, obviously. But I think you got it on the head when you said that corporates are not ready yet for this, and the new things and new models evolve out of it. So I see there's a communication overhead. How about productivity? You feel that that's a challenge to manage as well?
Big challenge. Yeah, and the communication platforms we have today are in some part a lot like people replying all to an email.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if you're listening to this and you ever click reply all, I'm not sure we're going to be friends. But in general, the idea of creating ongoing spam is challenging. So yeah, I don't think that the corporate world is quite ready right now. And I think that it's important to know when I send something out, it's going to impact, X amount of time from however many people it's going out to, no matter what channel, what platform it's going out to. And I think being thoughtful about that other person is important. Maybe in a similar way, if you're physically in a room and there's always the person who's doing all the talking, it's disrespectful.
Yeah.
Right? So there are times where we have to give and take for other people. And I think just talking, whether that be, digitally or otherwise, just talking to hear yourself is ineffective. So I think we're going to need another, sort of wave of communication, teaching each other how to communicate more effectively in a distributed world like this.
Yeah.
And there are.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts on, I always, because I had a lot of this teaching background as well. So my favorite thing is always to pick up a marker or something and put something on a whiteboard and while discussing and scribble it. And that's how my mind starts working or start walking and talking. And that's how my mind works. So I personally feel that I'm kind of like a slave to now this Zoom meeting where I need to be on a video. And if I just don't have my hands and my tools with me. The whiteboards are over internet, maybe not be that easy to use or what. So yeah. So what's your thoughts on that? The tools that create that quick ability to help, that give us ability to make people understand quickly. The tools that, you can be on someone's computer and tell them a quick short stuff. That is all gone. So how you feel about that? I'm talking about these challenges because I'm living through them, actually, some of these.
No, it's absolutely true. And I think it's interesting. First of all, in some ways, those tools are gone. In some ways, they've changed. And so the first thing I try to do is say, what am I just relying on as a crutch? So I, too, am a whiteboard person. Like, grab a marker. If I can't smell the marker, we're probably not talking. So that's a challenge, and I think the engineers and consultants among us are just struggling right now. Here's a quick tip that I found, and this is, everybody has their own thing. Use your iPad and in whatever app you use for drawing on and share your screen, and it's just like a whiteboard. And so when you say, let me show you what I'm talking about, you can quickly display the screen in the same way at some point somebody changed from blackboards to whiteboards. in the 70s, 80s, I don't know. So moving to a digital world gets a similar type of point across. In other ways, it's challenging our language skills. We have to learn to translate visual into verbal communication. I think the other thing that I see is really peeling the layers back and understanding, what am I trying to communicate? And sometimes the reason we whiteboard something out, for example, is we're actually trying to structure our own thoughts.
Yep.
We're trying to put them in a succinct, structured way. So what I'm personally doing, because I also struggle with this, is doing, whether it's a pre-read for a meeting or in a one-on-one, putting my thoughts, documenting my thoughts first before I have the conversation. By the way, it makes the conversation shorter. I say, let me just send you something 5 minutes before we talk to kind of prep on it, and then I'll walk you through it. And that at least allows me to either have the visual, or maybe it's an outline format or whatever it is, to be able to talk through it. Requires us to be more prepared. Or like I said, my iPad and winging it is also part of the tool chest right now.
Right. Yeah. So I guess you are now going into the meetings a little bit more prepared, which is actually good for meeting productivity in a way, that you know that you have to cross that barrier and make someone understand. So that is happening. I mean, we talked about some of the challenges of working from home, but also, I mean, I've seen now corporates have really started to think about it more of, oh, I can save this cost. I do not have to have this big office and whatnot. So have you seen this kind of mentality, or the corporate really thinking in terms of advantages of, why do I need an office anyway? So, I mean, how are you seeing stuff around you?
That's a really big thing. I want to go back to the whiteboard just for one moment.
Sure.
I mean, the other thing is camera placement. You can use a whiteboard and have the same kind of conversation.
Yeah.
In my office, I'm not at home right now, but when I'm in my office at home, I have a whiteboard I can just draw on, and you just move the camera to a different place. And so you can do that. It's not as effective, but.
But my challenge over here is that when I do this whiteboard talking, I have a blue marker and someone has a red marker, and we both draw on the same thing. That is still best. But you're right. I mean, we were doing an app for a startup where actually they were just doing this on-screen drawing thing that you can simultaneously draw, work together on something. So I mean, these kind of tools will just become ubiquitous in a bit of time, and everybody will start getting comfortable with that.
Yeah. You asked a question I think is a real key question about how, what's the new normal going to look like, in especially relating to travel. So I'm on the board of several companies and do some advising for companies. That's the last 45 days. I've spent 100% of my professional time with companies trying to help make decisions right now. And so a lot of it initially was, how bad is this going to be from a health perspective?
Right.
And then next it was like, what does this mean to the economy, and to specifically our sector of the economy and us as a company? And going through that, and of course, a lot of guesswork, and it changes daily. And we have lots of these conversations. And then it's, how do we communicate this to the various stakeholders, our employees, our customers, our partners? And now I think we're in a mode, as of this today, when we're speaking, by the time someone hears this, it'll be different. But as of today, almost all the conversations are around, assuming we can begin to recover to some sense of normalcy. What does that look like for us? So there's there's a whole spectrum. I won't go into, let's stay specifically on travel. There's a lot of components of this, but specifically to travel, in some ways, I think what will happen once travel opens back up, we're going to see probably the boomerang swing the other way, where people are going to do some unnecessary flying around just to get in front of people because there's longing for it. But I do think it will normalize lower than it has in the past, because I guess I was a little naive in that, I've been working in the tech related industries for 15, 20 years. So I actually assumed that most people leverage technology like this today. And it turns out they don't. Many industries are so people dependent and so in-person dependent. I've had people selling video conferencing platforms fly to me to sell me that platform. And, which by the way, is not really eating from your own restaurant. And so I think what we'll see is at least the companies that I'm talking to, we're looking at, let's actually use this as a great opportunity to decide what does need to happen in person. What kind of travel is valuable? What kind of roles need to do it? And I think there'll be some logic to that. And in many cases, I think many people will be refreshed that you're not required to fly out on Monday and back on Thursday night.
Right.
You're not required to have an in-person whatever meeting you have every month. And that's going to be helpful. I think the others will realize the other question is, what are we missing in this virtual environment? What have we been missing? So that when we're back to normal, we want to add more of that thing. One thing that I'm noticing, it's not so much the business productivity people are missing, it's the human element. So I think you'll see more things like maybe it's executive quarterly business reviews, or maybe it's other team building type of things. People might put more emphasis on experiential travel, even in the corporate world, and more functional will be remote. I'm also seeing from a travel perspective, you know, I mentioned recruiting before. I definitely see a lot of talent acquisition changing to where a higher percentage of it is either synchronous or asynchronous video interviewing processes, better for both. It's very likely that the people who are required to be in the office 5 days a week, that may change and be more flexible to a lower number of days per week, because they're realizing you're probably spending, you know, 10 to 15 hours a week commuting.
Right.
And for many people that don't on public transportation, a lot of times that's dead time. So we're starting to recover some of that from our lives right now, and I think a lot of people want to give it back. So companies will make some decisions, but people are also kind of enjoying some of this part. And you know, an example in education, I have 3 boys. I have one in college, one in high school, one in junior high. I am pretty sure none of them ever want to go back to a traditional classroom again. You know, this has been great for them.
They're having a time of their life right now. The students, I guess.
Oh, and in a couple of cases, they're actually learning more. I mean, they're getting like great education, whether from Khan Academy or from other, you know, sources, like fantastic institutional knowledge. But I think, I do think we'll see this big trend towards leveraging, you know, digital platforms more effectively, less physical travel. Yeah, and then I think, you know, we'll more than likely also see learning and development, like distance learning in the corporate world, grow rapidly. You know, there's some companies are doing some really innovative things in this space. And I think for those of us, like, for example, flying someone around the world to 29 offices to train on that one topic is exhausting for the instructor and not as effective for the people as having great content available on demand that you can modularize. I think we'll see a shift to that direction as well.
Yeah, so I'll come to that as well. But so do you see that this work from home thing is in a way a leveler as well? So for instance, there were companies who would be thriving on the fact that, yeah, we are a staffing company, we can put people in your office, and we have a company where a lot of people can come in, versus there's a small company out there who said that I'm remote, I can work, but they could not compete with these companies with large physical presence. But now with everyone is remote, it's kind of a leveler in a way that if your guys are working remotely, why can't mine? So what's your thoughts on, what are your thoughts on that?
First, I love that question. I think it's a great leveler, not just between companies. You know, the competition for who has the fanciest sushi bar is ridiculous, because we as employees, maybe the privileged people who get to work for those companies that have all of these nice perks, that's nice. But, you know, all the studies continue to show us that's not why they're there. They're not there because of the, you know, shoe shine that's available to them. And yet there's this kind of ridiculous competition for it. And if you look at the macro picture, that's money being spent on things that actually could be spent on either building a better product or paying their employees better or giving, you know, to the societies that they live in. Like, it's just maybe an excess that isn't necessary in our society in general. So I think that is interesting. They're not competing for physical space. I thought where you were going to go with the great leveling is actually between people. I think increasingly hierarchy is less and less tolerated by the people entering the workforce. And I love the fact that, you know, I had a conversation last week with a CEO of a very large publicly traded company, you know, in his home office, you know, in a polo shirt. His office was a mess. And it looked a lot like the sales development person that I talked to 2 days before. Okay. And I love that. You know, this is like, you're seeing real human beings in a normal element, not sort of, you know, in the fancy little corner office.
You're looking at their actual picture, not their LinkedIn picture. That's what you want to say.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, you're probably not seeing the Instagram version of themselves. You know, you're seeing more of the Twitter version of themselves versus LinkedIn. But yeah, that's anything that can level peer-to-peer conversations and eliminate barriers and layers. You know, I think it's going to be effective for business. And this is one moment where also the fact that no one really knows what's happening next, no matter how smart you think you are. You have about as good of an idea as a person who's not as smart as you of what will happen next in this situation. And that common uncertainty is a unifier. And I think, so in some ways, people are going to enjoy that. They're going to enjoy those kind of connections.
Yeah. So, and that takes us to the next question, that it's a situation that we have never been there before. It's a great leveler in many ways. What are the opportunities you see for tech, for new businesses? I mean, the last time the recession happens, there were new unicorns. And I mean, every depression brings up with itself a new set of opportunities. We already see this I mean, there had been office productivity tools. Now we need work from home productivity tools and whatnot. So what kind of opportunities you really see in tech space and business space where the next billion-dollar companies can come in?
It's a great question. You know, if I had that crystal ball, I have some opinions. And so our opinions are usually based also around our own experiences. So this to me is a little bit selfish, my answer, in that I have worked as a remote worker for a long time, and I am so excited about the innovation and money and thoughts going into fixing all the problems I've had the last 10 years. One of them is exactly what you mentioned, collaboration tools, collaboration beyond text. You know, interacting with another person, there's the drawing it out, there's the communication, there's the showing them an object, there are going to be ways in which we can communicate digitally that are much closer to mirroring how we do it in person, that finally the barrier to breakthrough is like, look, we have to be able to do this. This isn't a nice to have. It's not like, well, you could just jump on a plane. No, let's replace the human experience as much as we can. Maybe it's probably augmented reality in some way that becomes mainstream. That, you know, bandwidth is cheap, the technologies and processing is cheap. Being able to do some kind of augmented reality where we can digitally, you know, virtually be in the same meeting rooms, that kind of thing will take off. I don't think it'll be huge, but I think it'll go. The low-hanging fruit, I think it's absolutely all of the unified communication platforms will likely see a strong growth. Every one of them, you've seen these press releases come out, whether 10 to 20x growth at this time. They won't go back to where they were. They won't stay at 20x, but they won't go back to where that'll be growing. I really see right now the distance learning, especially corporate distance learning, being big. So I think anybody who's building specifically tech-based learning, but, you know, teaching tomorrow's workforce really is going to happen more. You know, just a little bit of a plug for automation in general. I think, look, you know, how do you weather this potential future storms? You automate as many things as possible. Right now, anything that's happening in an automated way, through whether not just RPA, but any kind of automation, productivity has less of a hit. So I think we'll see more of that. You know, a good parallel, perhaps, is looking back to the Industrial Revolution, or maybe not industrial, the automation of the manufacturing floor. Mm-hmm. What happened when robots could start to do things that people were doing? Well, you could work 24 hours a day, you could have lower error rates, you could have lower production costs, you could have higher quality, all of that stuff. That now moving into the knowledge work, we'll start to see, you know, things like that happening. And then I really feel like there's going to be a pretty strong, like, one thing that we haven't talked about here is there's been a massive economic impact, and it is disproportionately loaded on the hourly and blue collar worker. Yeah. Millions of people right now are not only, you know, people who have been not only paycheck to paycheck, it's day to day. Think about working in a restaurant where the tips you get that day determine the groceries you buy that night. Right. And that part of the workforce not only deserves, but will, I think, be seeking opportunity for alternative means of creating an income. Like, let's say that the travel industry we talked about doesn't come back to 100% of what it was. That's displaced workers.
And the hospitality industry in general, I mean, the hotels, the restaurant, I find it tough. And I really like this thing about our conversation, that this human touch needs to be there. I mean, I also try to think what can be done for them. I mean, there could definitely be new ways, but right now, I think they're going through a tough time. I totally agree with you. I don't know how it's going to come back, because anything that depends upon people coming together to do something. I mean, be it a football match, be it at a restaurant or something, or an event. I think for some, I mean, near future, it's not happening. and that is going to take a lot of jobs away, a lot of, so yeah, let's see. Okay, so yeah, the economic impact is where. Uh, Now coming to the last segment of this, that before you leave, I mean, we are all working from home. Share with us some tips of being more productive, active, and how we can really make best use of this time, and something that we've never been used to before.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, this is a good thing, not a bad thing for productivity. I am a big advocate for you'll get way more done when you're not distracted by the nonsense of the unimportant things around you. So for example, one of the most inefficient things in the world is a commute. That's gone. I mean, maybe walk from your bedroom to the table, but the distractions of a meeting that's booked, is gone. So here's a couple of tips I have. The first one is wake up. And I mean, literally, like, get up in the morning and get going. And it's surprising to me how many people rely on a boss or a company or a set of hours or store hours to decide when they wake up and when they shower, or if they shower, and get dressed and get going in the day. So rewind back, 100, 150 years ago to the agricultural society, people just walk up because the animals had to be fed and things had to be done. So I think the idea of like, look, you are in control of yourself. Like, you're not a victim of anything. Get up and get going. And create the routines. I think it's important for productivity to think beyond just work. Like, you have a physical self, you have a mental, spiritual, emotional, financial. Those components have to be managed. So whatever the right morning routine is when you're productive, I would use it even if your workplace is your kitchen table. So it's, maybe it's working out, maybe it's eating, a decent breakfast, maybe it's not, maybe it's meditation, prayer, whatever you do to get ready. That's the starting point, is like, get going. The second thing I would do is, I think it's really important for productivity right now of doing something that we should have always been doing, which is creating that sort of prioritized daily task list. What are the things I need to get done today, and in what order? If they're stack ranked, I have a ABC method, which is like, A, it has to be done. B, it really should be done. C, it'd be nice to get this done. And then inside of ABC, this is sort of micromanaging myself, but I do 1, 2, 3. And then A1, A2, A3. So if I only get through the A's, the most important things got done, sort of to put the big rocks in first. The other thing that I do to keep this non-robotic is there's a list of people in your life, and just keep this professional at the moment, that it's really a good idea to keep in touch with. That's those people you ping and say happy birthday on LinkedIn, or whatever, like just lightweight relationships. I try to keep maybe, 5 to 15 a day of those new ones each day. And maybe it's sending them a text message, maybe it's a 2-minute phone call. Hey, just checking in, say how you're doing. That doesn't sound like productivity, but one is it's continuing to nurture a relationship. You're not having hallway conversations right now. You're not having water cooler conversations. So just ping them. And by the way, it feels good. They enjoy it. You probably feel like, wow, I haven't talked to, Sally forever. So those little things are good. And then I think also it's really important that, like, just like with physical meetings, I am not a fan of the structured amount of time being used because it's booked. So if you have a 1-hour meeting booked, at the beginning of the meeting, what do we want to accomplish? And then when we're done, let's be done. It might be 20 minutes. It might be 55 minutes. But don't eat up the time just because it's there. And then I would say also productivity for me, the most productive thing I think that I do is pick up the phone and have 2 to 5 minute phone calls. So there's this email thread, or there's a Slack channel, or there's something going on, and it's like, this is going to be back and forth all day. And just pick it up and saying, hey, I noticed this. Can we just knock this out real quick? And those things become, really, really productive. And then finally, I think I would say making sure that when you're having conversations, that you're not just continuing the conversation, but a decision is being made. Yeah. So one of the least productive things is, great, why don't we follow up on this and we'll catch up next? Like, that's an ineffective set of conversations. But move on to advance it or kill it or take action on it.
Yeah, I think that's last part is very important, that all the meetings and everything needs to eventually end in an action, so a certain set of actions that you can really take. And I also feel, it's a lot similar to what we are looking at in the software or computer world, that there used to be a mainframe, and then everything moved away from the mainframe to the fat client, and now everything is going back to cloud, and there's a mixture of that. So I guess there were physical offices, everyone used to go there, Now everyone is work from home, and I guess in the future somewhere we will have an equilibrium where some work from home and some kind of an office. So I think that's where the world is going. But yeah, I also agree that there's now a good set of opportunities available out there where the new businesses can come in, new tech can come in. I mean, we talk to customers day in, day out about their technology needs and work with them. So obviously the natural thing that everyone tries to do is to replicate what has happened or what is happening in the physical world. Mm-hmm. And I feel that's very similar to that. When we used to have this button to click on a phone or something, I mean all the mm-hmm. Or everything that we used to think is was all about having a keypad on a phone, and one big giant actually went down just because they kept their keyboard. I mean, BlackBerry. I'm talking about that. And Apple came in and they just gave us a new way of doing stuff on that. So I guess while a lot of us will try to replicate a lot of things that we had been doing in the physical world into the virtual world. In time, newer ways of things will come up, which will be more productive and which will be better suited to all this work from home kind of a thing. But I think there's an opportunity for everyone out there. So I really enjoyed our conversation, Wade. Anything you want to add at the last? And I guess that should be it about our podcast today.
The only thing I would add is like, this is an opportunity. There's certainly like, I'm conscious of the societal impact right now. What's going on, and at a macro level, there's certainly health-related issues here. Although related to 7.5 billion people in the world, like putting it in perspective, it really is in the history of mankind. This is actually minimal headwinds. There have been much harder things faced in the world. We are not like going through the most difficult thing mankind's ever dealt with. This is something that at least every 100 years comes along, and so like put it in perspective. And I think also for most of us, really, it's been an inconvenience, to be quite clear. There are other people who have been dramatically impacted. So first thing I would say in a time like this, who are the people who are personally dramatically impacted, and how do we invest in them first? This is not about productivity and personal gain. It's about being a good societal citizen. But as it relates to business, I think I think about a little bit of like shake it off and step up. And there are opportunities right now that we've never had before. And those opportunities are within ourselves. So learning, developing, growing. Do you have time now to do things you may not have had time before? New skills to learn, new books to read. Maybe you want to learn a new language. I mean, there's all those kind of things. Maybe you have the privilege of being right now around people that you love, and your family or whoever that happens to be, and investing in those relationships. It's not about efficiency. It's about building relationships. And then from a business standpoint, I think taking advantage of uninterrupted time to be creative. Think about what's next for our business. Think about what could and should we be doing differently. You have the perfect excuse to pivot. This, in some ways, provides air cover to make the changes you've needed to make, and to be able to make those right now and come out of this cocoon. It's like the cocoon's so restrictive, but the reason the cocoon exists is so that caterpillars are turning into a butterfly. They push and struggle against it and develops the strength so that by the time they break free, they have the strength and the ability to fly. So I wouldn't sort of resent the cocoon. This is a time to think, develop, iterate, pivot, and to come out as a much different being than we were before, and using the time wisely instead of binge watching and having a bunch of bad behaviors. This could be a time to actually become like a very different version of yourself and of your business. So I just encourage people to take advantage of it in that way.
Yeah, and I think this is this is kind of a unique opportunity where all of a sudden, I mean, you can relate to kind of everyone in the world. I mean, I have never experienced this before, where I can talk to anyone and find that we are all in the same boat. So I think it's there's a lot of relatability going on, where a lot of people are now much more open to talk. That gives rise to, new human behaviors. It gives you opportunity to show your human side, as well as you can find new relationships, new business opportunities, new ways to think, new ways to collaborate. And I guess you're right. The first and foremost priority is obviously to see humans around you and see what you can do for them. And obviously, the business opportunities will be dozens and dozens or more around there. So thank you very much for being with me, Wade. I really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you once again.
Absolutely. Yep. Have a great day.
Thank you, Wade and Umair, for being with us today and offering insights around the massive cultural shift we are experiencing these days. Thanks for listening to this episode by BetterTech. If you enjoyed this podcast, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to share it across your favorite social networking platform. We look forward to bringing you the latest industry news in our next episode. In the meantime, take a look at our other episodes and hit subscribe with the links in the description box below so that you don't miss out on the latest in tech.